Managing inventory effectively can be the difference between profit and loss. Two common strategies are just-in-time, referenced as JIT for short, and the traditional stocked approach, which includes safety stock and reorder points. But which one is right for your business? In this video, I'll explain how these two strategies work, their advantages and disadvantages, and how to decide which one to use for each of the items you sell. Yes, you heard that correctly. The devil's in the detail on this decision, and we'll determine our strategy at the item level and not necessarily pick the same strategy for all of the items we carry. Let's get started. Let's start with just-in-time, or JIT. This strategy minimizes inventory by ordering and receiving materials only when needed. Here's how it works. Instead of holding large amounts of inventory, businesses order materials and products right before they are needed in production or for customer orders. This reduces carrying costs, waste, and the risk of obsolete inventory. It works best when suppliers are reliable, close to you, and the lead times are short. Let's look at an example. Imagine an auto manufacturer that receives car parts only when they're scheduled to build a car. If they need 100 engines this week, they only order 100, no more, no less. This reduces storage costs, but requires precise coordination with suppliers and their deliveries. Since they only bring in what's needed, a key thing to realize about a JIT strategy is that it is a zero safety stock model. Now, the advantages are lower carrying costs, less waste and risk of inventory becoming obsolete, more flexibility in adapting to changes in demand and changes in parts. The disadvantages are that you are at a higher risk of stockouts if suppliers delay shipments or have some sort of supply chain issue. It requires precise demand forecasting. We all know how challenging it can be for demand forecasting. And it is heavily dependent on supplier reliability. In another video, I showed how to calculate the variation in lead times from your supplier for each of your items. That type of analysis can be used to determine whether you deem a supplier to be consistent enough to be considered for a JIT strategy. Now, let's look at a more traditional approach, which is stocking inventory using safety stock and reorder points. In another video, we covered how the stock levels look over time under this model. This is the traditional sawtooth diagram of stocked inventory. Here's how this strategy works. Businesses hold extra inventory called safety stock to prevent stockouts. They set reorder points based on demand patterns and lead times. These can be calculated from historical demand. They can also be calculated from forecasted values if a company deems its historical demand not to be representative of its future demand. When stock levels hit the reorder point, a new order is placed to replenish inventory before it runs out. Let's look at an example. Think about a grocery store that always keeps a backup supply of milk. The sale of milk would not be the same every day, as it likely peaks on the weekends when more people can get to the grocery store. Based on the fluctuation of milk sales over time and the lead time of milk deliveries, the company would calculate their safety stock and reorder point values, and when the stock of milk drops below the reorder point, they would seek another delivery of milk. Now, something like milk also has the added complexity that this item is perishable, so when the grocery store determines how much milk to bring in on its next delivery, the expiration of the milk has to be considered. The advantages of a traditional stock strategy are that it reduces the risk of stockouts because you're going to carry safety stock. It works well with unpredictable or volatile demand. There's less disruption if suppliers are unreliable or become unreliable. And you're in a better position to react to unpredictable disruptions to the supply chain. The disadvantages of a traditional stock strategy are that higher carrying costs exist due to extra inventory, which impacts your cash flow. You have a risk of holding obsolete or slow-moving stock. It requires more warehouse space, and that is an additional cost as well. Now the important question. How do you decide which inventory strategy to use? Let's break it down by product type and business needs. Use JIT for high-cost items, example specialized machinery components, perishable goods, for example fresh food or pharmaceuticals. Use it for fast-moving items with predictable demand. Use it on items with reliable suppliers and short lead times. The traditional strategy with safety stock and reorder points is recommended for essential items with uncertain demand, for example medical supplies. For products with long lead times, for example international shipments or products coming from unstable nations. It's recommended for high demand seasonal items, example holiday products, and recommended for items where stockouts would cause major disruptions for your company. I mentioned previously that you won't necessarily want to pick one strategy for all of your items. If you are considering the concept of JIT, you will likely find that you can JIT some of your items, but you need to keep a traditional stocked strategy for other items. As one example, if you run an electronics business, you might use JIT for expensive processors that tend to go obsolete quickly, but keep safety stock for common power cords because they have long lead times. Before I conclude this video, I want to talk about a special situation under the seasonal demand category. Under the guidance I've provided, we would select the safety stock and reorder point model for inventory management. However, I have worked with a business where the demand for their items is extremely seasonal, meaning that the difference between a low demand month and a high demand month is very large. Under the safety stock and reorder point model, the amount of safety stock needed would cause this company to carry a lot of inventory throughout the year to deal with this variation. That also means that they would carry a lot of inventory unnecessarily for about 8 months of the year, and that ties up substantial cash flow. In this special case, I tend to ignore the calculated safety stock suggestions until we get closer to the peak season and within the lead times of suppliers. This is a more manual approach on an item-by-item basis, but it does save the company from sitting on a lot of stock in low demand months. In summary, JIT helps reduce costs and waste, but requires reliable suppliers and accurate forecasting. Traditional stocking with safety stock and reorder points is great for stability, but can be expensive and impact your cash flow. The key is to pick the right strategy for the type of inventory you're managing. That's why I say that this strategic decision needs to be done at the item level and not the company level. I always have companies that say they want to be JIT, but when I walk them through what that really means and we analyze their demand and supplier performance, the end result is usually a combination of JIT for some items and the traditional model for others.